All right, it's good to see everyone today as we continue in the book of Samuel. I have us on page 10 in this edition of Samuel. We're continuing in chapter 2, beginning with verse 12. Samuel had just been given over, he's born and given over to Eli, the high priest, in fulfillment of the promise that or the deal that that Hannah made with God. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Uvenei Eli b'nei Vilia'al lo yad'u et Adonai. The sons of Eli were, it says here, base men. I would say they were more than worthless. They were evil. They were wayward. That is, had strayed from God's path, almost like idolaters. Okay. So the sons. So this, it's an interesting commentary about the. Okay, I'm sorry. My phone was showing me texts. It's an interesting commentary on clergy. So here's Eli, the high priest, and his sons. You would expect that the high priest's sons they'd at least be Jewish, if not committed to the path of becoming high priests themselves. But instead, they are just the opposite. They have rejected their father's path, and they've rejected the path of being an Israelite, that is, to believe in the one God, and they've rejected. So the sons of Eli were base, how does alter translate it? Worthless fellows. They did not know God. So I would say they definitely knew God. They rejected God. I think that would be, from the context, what lo yadu literally means they did not know God. I think in this context that they rejected God. 13, Umishpat hakohanim et ha'am, kol ish zoveach zevach, uva na'ar hakohen kivashel habasar, vahamazleg shlosh hashinayim biyado. So the Hebrew is a little awkward here. Mishpat hakohanim. So mishpat is law, the law of the Kohanim, but it says here the custom of the priests. Alter says this was the priest's practice. So umishpat hakohanim et ha'am. So the practice of the Kohanim with the people. Yeah, it's just, again, the Hebrew is awkward here. Anyone who offers a sacrifice, the Na'ar, the servant of the Kohen, would come as the meat was cooking, and a 3-tined fork would be in his hand. So it says here a flesh hook. I'm translating it as fork because in modern Hebrew, a fork is a mazleg. Okay, so like if you go into if you want to buy cutlery, you're looking for a mazleg, which is a fork, a sakin, which is a knife, and a kaf, which would be a soup spoon, and a kapit, which would be a teaspoon. Okay, so mazleg is a fork. So here, it's a flesh hook of 3 teeth. I think it's a 3-pronged fork or a 3-tined fork in his hand. So a person brings a sacrifice while it's cooking. The servant of the Kohen would come with a 3-tined fork.
Jonah?
Yes.
Can a woman bring a sacrifice?
It says ish. It doesn't say isha. Isha is woman. So a woman is commanded sometimes after childbirth to bring a sacrifice, and could be other times when she could bring an offering. Is she allowed to do it herself? Well, according to the Torah, no one really offers the sacrifice themselves directly. They bring it to the temple, well, to the Mishkan, later to the temple, and the Kohanim take care of it in the person's presence. So this, verse 13, is giving the impression that a person is allowed to do the prep and put the animal on the altar. So I'm not sure about that, and we'll look at the commentary to see if it has to reconcile anything. But to your point, Bess, I think a woman could go to the temple, and there would be Kohanim there in the women's section to accept the offering and on the woman's behalf.
So does a person say this is a sin offering, this is a burnt offering?
Yes, I would imagine so. Yes. Okay, 14. Vehika ba kior, o ba dud, o ba kalachat, o ba parur, kol asher ya'aleh hamazleg yikach hakohen bo, kacha ya'asu lechol Yisrael habaim sham beshilo. So while the meat is cooking, he's taking this 3-tined fork in his hand, and he hits the pan or the kettle or the cauldron or the pot. So that's how this translation translates those 4 words, those utensils. Here, it's a cauldron, a pot, that's an altar, that is, cauldron, pot, vat, or kettle. So he rearranges the translations just to show that these words are unusual and we're not sure exactly how to translate them. Okay, so these are 4 different vessels into which meat would be cooked, and then all that the fork brought up, the Kohen would take. Such would be done for all of Israel who came to Shiloh. So I think that what's being described here is you got the animal, you got the meat cooking on the altar. The servant of the Kohen grabs it while it's cooking with this fork, which I would imagine would be a big cooking. Imagine if you're working at on a barbecue grill, the kind of fork you use there is a longer kind of fork than the fork that you use to eat, right? So the longer kind of fork, and the longer kind of fork, I'm imagining, has 2 prongs on it, but imagine a 3-pronged long fork like that, handling this meat. Now, it could be a side of beef, so that's like a pretty big piece of meat. So the slave is taking, or the servant is taking this meat with the fork and hitting the meat into one of these vessels. And whatever remains on the fork belongs to the Kohen. And whatever goes into the vessel would be the offering to God. I think that's what verse 14 is describing for us. Okay? Now, the Torah describes from which sacrifices a Kohen is allowed to eat a portion. And some certain sacrifices have to be totally consumed on the altar, and other sacrifices, the Kohen is allowed to have some of the portion. Okay? Here, it doesn't say that. It says whatever is being offered up on the altar, this is the process. You take the fork, the big cooking utensil, with the meat, hit it into the pot. Whatever stays on the fork belongs to the Kohen. Now, I wonder if, certainly depending on how far along in the cooking process it is, the meat could totally stay on the fork, or the meat could fall off the fork, right? In other words, I think if the meat was rare, it might stay in one piece. Whereas if it's overcooked, like barbecue, slow-cooked, low-temperature, slow-cooked barbecue, then it kind of shreds and nothing stays on the fork. Or maybe a little bit stays on the fork. So it all depends on how far along in the cooking, rare to well done, how much stays on the fork, and therefore how much the Kohen gets to eat. 15.
A question.
Yes?
Is it possibly unique to Shiloh? Is there maybe each different altar place?
So it shouldn't be. The Torah seems to provide for us in the book of Leviticus a method for offering the sacrifices, which should be the method for all time. Why Samuel is describing this for us, which certainly highlights a difference from the Torah, is a question. So we'll read through verse 21, and then we'll look at the commentary on this to see how we understand it. 15. Gam beterem yaktirun et achelev, uva na'ar hakohen, va'amar la'ish hazoveach, tina vasar litzlot la kohen, velo yikach mimcha basar mevushal ki im chai. So before the fat, the particular kind of fat is called chelev, and the book of Leviticus mentions that word a ton of times in describing the parts of the animal that are offered up on the altar. So the chelev is a particular kind of fat. So before the fat was made into smoke, the servant of the Kohen would say to the man offering the sacrifice, give meat for the Kohen to roast, and for he will not, so here the translation doesn't help, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. Let me see what Alter says. Even before they had burned off the fat, the priest's lad would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, hand over meat to roast for the priest, for he won't take boiled meat from you, only raw. Okay, 16. Vayomer elav ha'ish, kater yaktirun kayom hachelev, vekach lecha ka'asher ta'aveh nafshecha, va'amar lo ki ata titein, ve'im lo lakachti bechozka. So the man said to him, let the fat be made to smoke first of all, and then take as much as your as much as your soul desires. And then the servant would say, no, but you shall give it to me now, and if not, I will take it by force. So was this like the usual give and take? Or is this an example of one time that the priest's servant is doing this? I think this is the give and take. Vatahi chatat hane'arim gedola ma'od et penei Adonai, ki ni'atzu ha'anashim et minchat Adonai. And the sin of these lads, so it's not the servant of the Kohen, so it seems to be Eli's sons. This is a description of what Eli's sons are doing that are showing disfavor in the eyes of in God's eyes. So the sin of the boys was very great before God, because they dealt contemptuously with the offering of God. So I guess there must have been enough people coming to Shiloh offering sacrifices that Eli couldn't handle it by himself. So he had his sons there. Now, according to the Torah, according to the rabbis, there were lots of Kohanim who handled the service in shifts. So I think the way it worked was that of all the Kohanim families, by the time of the Second Temple, each family would represent a tribe in Israel. And each of the tribes would have, when all 12 tribes were in the land of Israel, each of the tribes would have 2 weeks. So I think twice a year, each tribe would have 2 weeks. I'm thinking this out, because a tribe for 2 weeks, that would be 24 weeks. But then if they have 2 shifts of this every year, then it's 48 weeks, which is almost a full year. But with the way the Jewish year works, it works out that way. So anyway, each tribe would have 2 weeks in which they are supplying everything that is needed, the animals, the wood, everything that is needed for the temple for those 2 weeks. And then the appropriate Kohen family who represents that tribe would be the family that would be working in the temple those 2 weeks. I think that's how the Mishnah and the Talmud describe how logistically this would all work. So I'm not sure why there should be enough Kohen families by the time of Samuel. It's been 3 or 4 generations since the Torah. So you have Eleazar and Itamar are Aaron's sons, and Eleazar and Itamar have children, and those children have children. So there are different families that should be available to be working in Shiloh. But Samuel is only telling us about Eli and his sons and how corrupt they've become, because they're demanding that meat from all the sacrifices be given to them. Okay, in counter to what the Torah says. Okay, so this is the description in these verses of how terrible they were. Okay, now so let's stop here. I said we'd go to 21, but this is a break here. Let's look at the commentary on this section. So back to page 10 on the right-hand side, base men, literally sons of Belial. knew not the Lord. They did not appreciate the demands which God's holiness made of them in their office. Custom of the priest's rightful share of a sacrifice was the breast and the right thigh, according to Leviticus 7. The sin of Hophni and Pinchas was therefore twofold, like these sons are named. They took indiscriminately of the flesh of the sacrifice, and they demanded flesh before the parts consecrated to God had been burned on the altar. The practice described in verse 15 may have been alternative to that mentioned in verses 13 and 14, or it may be that the double offense was committed in each case. 11, came before used to come, better used to come. The verbs throughout verses 13, 16 are frequentive in meaning. Fat smoke, see Leviticus 3. This amounted to sacrilege, as nothing should intervene between the presentation of the offering and the burning of the parts consecrated to God. Servant, literally lad. Sodden, literally boiled. First of all, literally like the day, at once. The young men, servants of Eli's sons. The men, Eli's sons. Okay. So Alter describes for us on page 249 the cauldron, the pot, the vat, the kettle. This catalog of implements is quite untypical of biblical narrative, and in fact, the precise identification of the sundry cooking receptacles is unsure. The unusual specification serves as satiric purpose. Eli's sons are represented in a kind of frenzy of gluttony, poking their three-pronged forks into every imaginable sort of pot and pan. This sense is then heightened in the aggressiveness of the dialogue that follows, in which Eli's sons insist on snatching the meat uncooked from the worshipers, not allowing them, as was customary, first to burn away the fat. Okay, so that's the description of their sin. So now we continue with verse 18. Ushmuel misharet et penei Adonai, Na'ar chagur ephod bad. And Shmuel ministered before God, being a child girded with a linen ephod. So he's kind of dressed like a Kohen. Ume'il katon ta'aseh lo imo, veha'alta lo miyamim yamima, ba'alota et isha lizboach et zevach hayamim. And his mother made him a little robe and would bring one. I think she would make a robe every year, would bring one to him from year to year when she came with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. So she'd visit once a year. Yes, Bess?
So there's 3 sacrifice pilgrimages to Jerusalem, and once a year they went to Shiloh to make a sacrifice?
So there's no Jerusalem yet. Jerusalem in the time of Samuel is still Jebusite territory. And so the Mishkan is in Shiloh. Why they're only coming once a year, I don't know, because the Torah specifically says to come 3 times a year. So I don't know. 20, Uveirach Eli et Elkanah et Ishto, ve'amar Yasem Adonai lecha zera min ha'isha hazot, tachat ha'she'ela asher sha'al Adonai, ve'halchu limakomo. So Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife and said, may God make you descendants from this woman for the loan which she gave to God, and they went home. So, in other words, when they would come to give this robe to Samuel, Eli would bless them and say, may you be fruitful, and in thanks for giving Samuel over as giving Samuel over to God. 21, Ki fakad Adonai et Chana, vatahar vateled shlosha vanim, ushte vanot, vayigdal hana'ar Shmuel im Adonai. And God remembered Hannah, that is, remembered in the way that I described this in the Torah study on Wednesday, when we looked at the Haftarah for tomorrow. The word pakad is more like you have a list, a to-do list, and you're checking off an item from your to-do list. So like you remember that you have something to do, and then you take care of it. That's pakad. So it's more than remembering. It's remembering and fulfilling a promise. Okay? So God fulfilled Hannah's fulfilled the promise to Hannah, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Shmuel grew up with God. Okay, so Eli's blessing was fulfilled. She had 5 more kids who go unnamed, and maybe in the Midrash they're named, but they go unnamed here. And Shmuel is who is the focus of our book, because who cares about the 5 other brothers and sisters that he has? Shmuel grows up with God. Okay. So now, on the bottom right of page 11, Samuel's spiritual development. The contrast between Samuel and the sons of Eli is a central theme of the development of this history, and it's effectively presented by this short, idyllic account of Samuel's first years of service, which, inserted in this place, serves to throw into still greater relief the heinous conduct of Hophni and Pinchas. Or continue on page 12, a child. The Hebrew na'ar may signify servant, as verse 15. Linen ephod. The ephod was a short garment secured around the waist by a girdle. It was at this time the distinctive dress of priests, although it is not enumerated in the Torah as one of the garments worn by ordinary priests. Occasionally it was worn by others engaged in religious ceremonies, for example, David, and here Samuel. So it's just interesting. The Torah describes this outfit for the Kohen Gadol, but it seems like other people would wear them for special occasions. Made, brought, better, used to make, used to bring. The verbs are frequentative and describe her annual practice. Little robe. The robe was a long outer garment worn by people of rank or special status. The Hebrew may mean robe of a child. Samuel required a new garment each year as he grew taller.
Excuse me. I was just wondering, I don't know if we covered this, who was raising Samuel?
Right. So he was being raised by Eli, and I guess Eli's wife, or maybe his daughters. So he's being raised in Eli's home.
Okay.
Yeah. 20, would bless. He would repeat the blessing each year. Unto their home, literally to his place. Grew, the same verb is used of Moses, and may denote mental and moral advancement as well as physical growth. So, in other words, we shouldn't understand literally that Samuel grew up with God. That is, physically grew up with God. He spiritually, religiously grew and matured with God. Okay, and Alter adds for us on page 250, ephod, a short garment, chiefly of linen, worn by priests. The Hebrew term has a second meaning, a device for divination manipulated by the officiating priests and that is the evident sense of ephod when it recurs in verse 28. And a little cloak would his mother make him. This is a poignant instance of the expressive reticence of biblical narrative. We have been told nothing about Hannah's feelings as a mother after her separation for the child for whom she so fervently prayed. This minimal notation of Hannah's annual gesture of making a little cloak for the son she has lent to the Lord beautifully intimates the love she preserves for him. The garment, fashioned as a gift of maternal love, stands in contrast to the ephod, the acolyte's official garb for his cultic office. Moreover, the robe will continue to figure importantly in Samuel's life and even in his afterlife, as we shall have occasion to see. Right. So Samuel is brought back from the dead by the witch of Endor when Saul goes to him, and he tries to convince Samuel when he's brought back from the dead to change whatever course of history it is. And I just got a note on Zoom that said my internet is unstable, so I hope everything that you're seeing me okay. And so a piece of Samuel's robe is ripped off by Saul. So that's right. He's just, Altars is pointing us this literary device foreshadowing what's going to happen later with Samuel's robe. Okay. And then year after year, the phrase takes us back to the iterative set tense of the beginning of the story. Okay. So we go on. We'll do 22 to 26. Ve'eli zakein ma'od, ve'shama et kol asher ya'asun banav lechol Yisrael, ve'et asher yishkevun et ha-nashim ha-tzovot petach ohel moed. So this verse adds more to the sins of Eli's sons. Eli was very old, and he heard all that his sons had done to all of Israel, and how they would lie with the women that did service at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Now, I don't know what kind of service that is. So it says here in altar, they lay with the women who flocked to the entrance of the tent of assembly. So in other words, they would take advantage of these women, either rape them or seduce them. So they took advantage of their father's position as Kohanim to demand this, the meat from all the sacrifices, and then also here, which wasn't described earlier, taking advantage of women who would come to the Mishkan. 23. Vayomer lahem lama ta'asun kadavarim ha'ele asher anochi shomea et divrechem ra'im me'et kol ha'am ele. So he said to them, why are you doing these things that I have heard about, these bad things from all this people? 24, Al Banai, Kilo Tova Hashmua Asher Anochi Shomea, Ma'avirim Am Adonai. Don't do this, my sons, because this isn't good, what I am hearing about how you are, which I hear the Lord's people do spread abroad, or evil things about you from all these. The altar says, what I hear that the Lord's people are spreading about. Im yecheta ish leish ufilalo Elohim, ve'im la'Adonai yecheta ish, mi yitpalel lo, velo yishma'u lekol avihem, ki chafetz Adonai lahamitam. So if one man sin against another, God shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? But they hearkened not unto the voice of their father, because the Lord would slay them. Alters translates this. I'm looking at the translations because the Hebrew is a little bit difficult for me. If a man offends against man, God may intercede for him. But if against the Lord a man should offend, who can intercede for him? And they did not heed their father's voice, for the Lord wanted to put them to death. So in other words, God made it so, like it was too late for them to repent, and God made it so that the sons would not listen to their father, because God had already decided that God was going to kill them. 26, V'hana'ar Shmuel holech v'gadel v'tov gam im Adonai v'gam im anashim. And so this is put here in contrast, and the boy Shmuel was getting growing and getting older and becoming good, both with God and with people. In other words, as he's growing up, the people of Israel got to know who he was because they saw him around Shiloh, and he was making a good impression, not only to God, but to all of Israel. Okay, so let's look at the commentary on this. At the bottom right of page 12, Eli's ineffective rebuke. Heard, did, better used to hear all that his sons were doing. They lay, on 13. The sin is so grave, the Jewish commentators found it difficult to believe that even Hophni and Pinchas were capable of it. And most of them explained the phrase as relating to the delay of the women in bringing their special offerings. All right, we'll see what Alter has to say about this in a moment. Did service, both here and in Exodus 38, where the same words are used, the classical Jewish commentators prefer the sense of assembled, that is, for prayer, instruction, or sacrifice. Why do ye such things? Eli's rebuke is so gentle that he deserves the reproach, he rebuked them not. Like, in other words, he should have been more forceful with his sons. Like, how dare you do this? I'm going to punish you. Why just speak gently in this way to his sons? 25, better if one man sin against another, Elohim shall mediate for him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who can intercede for him? Elohim refers either to God or to the judges, who are the representatives of God in executing justice on earth. The sense is clearly that for an offense of man against man, there may be a mediator, but for an offense against God, there can be no intercessor. There is a play in the Hebrew on the word pilel to mediate, and hippalel to interpose as mediator. The Lord would slay them, literally was pleased to slay them. They were so confirmed in their sins that they were incapable of repentance, and so beyond redemption. Their punishment was therefore necessary as a warning to others.
Rabbi?
Yes.
They refer to judges here. Now, who were they? I mean,
right. So it's so I think it's just the way Eli is trying to entreat his sons, and either by referring to God, Elohim, or referring to human judges, which are also Elohim. So it's just, the commentary here is just understanding that we could interpret it either way, as part of Eli's rebuke, his gentle rebuke of his sons.
Did human judges exist at that point?
According to the rabbis, they did.
Okay.
But we don't know for sure.
Jonah, could I ask
Yes.
another question?
Yeah.
Is Samuel the first time that the protagonist, the hero, is the oldest child in all of Torah, I think it's always the
Oh.
young that's the good guy. Moses, Aaron, and Abel, Cain.
It is possible.
Meaningless, perhaps, but
Yeah, but yeah. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we're supposed to take away anything from that, but because I'm not sure I don't recall commentary pointing that out. That this, but it is interesting. It is interesting to note.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then 26 in the commentary, again, by way of contrast, Samuel's progress as described grew favor, literally going and becoming big and good with the Lord, etc. See Proverbs 3 as another example by the same usage of the Hebrew, growing in favor with God. Okay, let's look at altar on these verses on page 251 below the line. And that lay with the women. This whole clause is missing in the Qumran scroll. So, in other words, the Dead Sea Scrolls, Qumran is the village in the northern area of the Dead Sea, where in the caves they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and every book of the Bible is found there in the scrolls. So the version of Samuel found there does not have this verse in it. So this whole clause is missing in the Qumran scroll and in one version of the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Bible. In fact, sexual exploitation was not mentioned in the initial narrative report of the son's misdeeds, right? So we're told about the misdeeds with the sacrifices themselves. We're not told in verses 14 to 17 anything about this with women. So there is, however, a consonance between their appetitive impulse in snatching the meat and grabbing the women, perhaps reinforced by the satiric and phallic image of thrusting forks into bubbling pots. Thank you to Alter and his understanding of literature there, adding that for us. Flocked, the Hebrew verb, might also mean ministered. 27. We're not up to 27 yet. Okay. So let's read. Let's see if we can finish the chapter. We might be able to do so. Vayavo ish Elohim el Eli, vayomer elav. Ko amar Adonai, haniglo nigleti el beit avicha, biotam b'mitzrayim levet paro. So a man of God came to Eli and said to him, "This is what God said. Did I reveal myself to your father's house when they were in Egypt in the house of Pharaoh?" 28. Uvachor oto mikol shiftei Yisrael li lechohen la'alot al mizbechi lahaktir ketoret laseit ephod lefanai ve'etna levet avicha ekol ishei b'nei Yisrael. And I chose him from among all the tribes of Israel to serve as a Kohen, to offer up on my altar, and to bring incense, and to wear the ephod before me, and give to your father's house all the offerings by fire from the people of Israel. Lama tiv'atu bezivchi uveminchati asher tziviti ma'on vatechabed et banecha mimeni lahavri achem mereshit kol minchat Yisrael la'ami. Why have you kicked at my sacrifice and my offering, which I have commanded in my house, ma'on, in my house, and honor your sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people? In other words, why have you gone against the rules which were set down for the Kohanim? 30. Lachein neum Adonai Elohei Yisrael, Amor amarti, Beitcha uveit avicha yithalchu lefanai ad olam, ve'ata neum Adonai Chalila li, ki mechabdai achabed uvozai yekalu. Therefore, the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I said indeed that your house and the house of your father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord says, be it far from me. For them that honor me, I will honor, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. 31.
John,
Yes?
I'm a little confused. It says earlier that I chose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be a priest. So he wasn't a Kohen. He wasn't.
He was a Kohen. He's just this prophet, whoever this unnamed prophet is telling Eli, reminding him of how his father's house was chosen by God from all the tribes to be a Kohen, and now look at the desecration that has been brought.
Okay, got it.
So 31, Hine Yamim Ba'im, Vegadati et Zroacha, Ve'et Zeroa Beit Avicha, Miot Zaken Beveitecha. And behold, the days will come that I will cut off your arm and the arm of your father's house, that there shall not be an old man in your house. Right? So in other words, I'm going to kill your children. Vehi batata tsar ma'on, bechol asher yetiv et Yisrael, velo yezaken beveitcha kol hayamim. And you shall behold a rival in my house, in all the good which shall be done to Israel, and there shall not be an old man in your house forever. That, in other words, I'm cutting off the line of Kohanim with you and setting up a rival. Ve'ish lo achrit lacha me'im mizbechi lechalot et einecha vela'adiv et nafshecha v'chol marbit beitcha yamutu anashim. Yet will I not cut off every man of you from your altar, and make your eyes to fail, and your heart to languish, and all the increase of your house shall die young men. 34, V'zelecha ha'ot asher yavo el shnei vanecha, el chofni ufinchas biyom echad yamutu shnehem. And this shall be the sign unto you, that which shall come upon your two sons, on Chofni and Pinchas, in one day they shall die, both of them. V'hakimoti li kohen ne'eman, ka'asher bilavavi uvenafshi ya'aseh, uvaniti lo bayit ne'eman, v'hitalech lifnei meshichi kol hayamim. And I will raise me up a faithful priest, that shall do according to that which is in my heart and in my mind, and I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before me, anointed forever. V'haya kol hanotar beveitcha yavo lehishtachavot lo, la'agorat kesef v'chikar lachem, v'amar sefachenina el achat hakehunot le'echol pat lechem. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left in your house shall come and bow down to him for a piece of silver and a loaf of bread, and shall say, put me, I pray you, into one of the priest's offices, that I may eat a morsel of bread. So whoever is going to be left alive is going to go begging for food. So the commentary here from 27, on page 14, man of God, that is a prophet, did I reveal myself? In Hebrew, the interrogative is often used to express a strong affirmation. Thy father, Aaron, the progenitor of the priestly families, were in Egypt in bondage too, literally belonged in Egypt too, where in ephod, the high priest's ephod is meant, all the offerings, yet your sons are dissatisfied with the provision made for them. Right, you were going to get enough food based on the laws in Leviticus. Why are they taking advantage this way? Honor your sons above me and not preventing them from abusing the sacrificial worship. Make yourselves fat. Eli is included in the reproach since it was inevitable that he should eat with his sons. Chiefest, that is the best part of. Thy house forever. Eli's house, as a branch of Aaron's, should have shared the promise made to Aaron's house and served as God's priests forever. 15, cut off your arm, destroy your strength and the strength of your house. The threat is that of a sudden disaster from which few of the family will escape, and the fulfillment was in the massacre of the priests of Nov in chapter 22. An old man, none of his family will attain to old age. Thou shalt behold a rival. Thou and the person of thy descendants will see another take thy place as priest in my habitation at the time when the nation will be most prosperous and the office most honorable. The reference is to the deposition of Abiathar in 1 Kings, who, escaping the massacre of the priests of Nov, had been David's faithful servant, but was removed from the priestly office by Solomon for his share in Adoniah's bid for the throne. So, in other words, we're going to be reading in 20 chapters ahead about a massacre of a priestly town, and that supposedly is going to be the fulfillment of this prophet's punishment, is told here.
Jonah?
Yes.
So only 2 of his sons are named, and one of them is Pinchas. Is there any commentary anywhere that contrasts the other Pinchas that we read about in the Torah, who was so righteous that he was almost a zealot?
Right.
I mean, it's kind of interesting
Yeah.
that
Right.
there's only 2 sons named, and one of them references a name that.
Right. I think it's just, yes, I hear you, but I'm not aware of a commentary that specifically contrasts this Pinchas with that Pinchas, but there should be, and but I'm not aware of it myself. All right, let's finish the commentary here. Your eyes, your heart. Eli is identified with his posterity. To serve under another high priest and to witness the ruin of their family will be for them a punishment worse than death. Young men, literally men, which is usually explained as in their prime, but Ehrlich interprets it as common men without high rank. This verse is a continuation of prophecy beginning in verse 32. A faithful priest, Sadok, whose family retained the high priesthood from the reign of Solomon until the destruction of the temple. So maybe this prophet is foreshadowing that future righteous high priest. 16, a sure house, a succession of high priests of long duration. My anointed, that is my king, the dynasty of David, forever better all his days. Bow down to him. The degradation of Eli's house will be complete when his descendants come as beggarly suppliants to seek favors from those who displace them. Okay, so clearly, according to this commentary, what is being described here is a foreshadowing of what's to happen later in Samuel and also in Kings in terms of those righteous priests coming. So I have a Zoom meeting at 10:30, so I want to be sure I have time for that. So we'll save Alter's commentary on this section for next time, and then continue with chapter 3. So let's, I'm just making a note of that. And remember that next Friday is Purim Day. And so I think most of you have said that you can make the 10 o'clock class. So we're going to have class at 10 o'clock instead of at 9:30, just next Friday. Okay? All right. Take care, everybody. I'm keeping the Zoom link on, but I'm gonna stop the recording.